All right. If everyone could please have a seat. Yeah. And we'll get started with our presentation. Of course, the configuration of the room is a little different because we're watching a presentation in the back of the council chamber. So everyone has to sit facing the back of the room where the screen is. My name is Steve Brady. I'm the chairman of the Local Historic District Study Committee, and I'd like to welcome you all to this evening's presentation on the proposed Center Village Local Historic District. So during this evening, we'll talk about the actual boundaries of the proposed district. We'll talk about what it is that the Local Historic District Study Committee does and what has to be done in order to form a local historic district. We'll also follow this presentation with a question and answer session. So anyone who has any questions could feel free to ask them at that time. So we'll get going right now, and once again, welcome. Once again, I'm Steve Brady, the chair of the Local Historic District Study Committee, and we'll look at this first slide. Is a beautiful image of an 1892 bird's eye view map showing the downtown. Many of these buildings are still there today. You should be able to recognize them. Anything from the Baptist Church to the Cornerstone Bank across the street from it. You can see the Edwards building along Main Street. And you can see basically everything that is pretty much intact today. And that is from 1892. So, once again, we're looking to save our architectural heritage in our town, which is unique to Southbridge. Okay, so I'd like to introduce the Local Historic District Study Committee members, and I'd like you to stand as I call your name. Melissa Hilly, Francine Farland, John Moore, Gabe McCarthy, and Jim O'Brien. Thank you. We have been working very hard over the last year and a half trying to get all the work done. Work had started originally back in the early 2000s, but there was a 15-year respite on the committee where it was not active. So we picked up where it was left off 15 years ago. So we were reactivated in 2019. So one of the questions people will have is, why a local historic district? Why do you need it? And there are several reasons. But I'd like to go into the ones that I see as important today. Past studies of Southbridge for the purpose of economic revitalization and redevelopment have highlighted the unique configuration of the historic center of Southbridge. In order to complement these studies and being in line with the Downtown Southbridge Urban Revitalization Project objective of preserving the historic character of the downtown, it has been considered critical to form a local historic district to protect the unique configuration of historic buildings in the downtown. Since 2002, there has been a local historic district study committee in the town of Southbridge. Though inactive for 15 years, it's been reactivated in the fall of 2019. The current goal of that committee is to determine the feasibility of creating a local historic district in the downtown area of Southbridge. There are over 100 communities in Massachusetts with local historic districts. There are over 200 local historic districts in Massachusetts because many towns have more than one. The first local historic district was founded in Charleston, South Carolina in 1931. They were somewhat forward-looking in their efforts to preserve their historical character. The first local historic district in Massachusetts was the Beacon Hill Historic District, founded in 1955. Communities such as Winchendon, Lowell, Charlton, and Billerica have local historic districts, and many more. As I've said, there's over 100 communities in Massachusetts with local historic districts. The major purpose of a local historic district. The major purpose is to preserve and protect the distinctive characteristics of buildings and places significant in the history of the Commonwealth and its cities and towns, to maintain and improve the settings of those buildings and places, to encourage new designs compatible with the existing buildings in the district. Local historic districts can be credited with saving the character of many areas in Massachusetts. Local historic districts provide protection from demolitions and inappropriate remodeling. Local historic districts provide assurance that the historic built environment will be there for future generations to enjoy. A local historic district provides a visual sense of the past. Local historic districts create pride in the community, create neighborhood stabilization, provide school children with educational opportunities, and the property values within a local historic district tend to stay the same or increase faster than in non-designated areas. So that is that you very rarely see a drop in property value in a designated local historic district. And that's because, and you see rates increase faster in a local historic district, and that is because in a local historic district, when someone purchases a property, he or she knows that the properties around them, the structures around his or her property will not be radically altered in the future. So what that creates is the stabilization, and that causes an increase in property value. It's a very beneficial thing for property owners. And as for education for school children, you may ask, well, what are the educational opportunities? Well, I can say back, a few years ago, I took a 6th grade class on a tour of the downtown a couple of times. I did one for a school down in Connecticut and one right here in Southbridge. We went downtown, we looked at the town and talked about the buildings in the downtown and the history of the town itself. And the children could actually see the history in the buildings and why they were built. Why was there a commercial district in our downtown? They could understand it, and I could show them the buildings that were built and buildings that were added onto over the years to become commercial that were once residential. And one of the fun things we had is in front of this very building, the Town Hall of Southbridge, there's a year written in Latin numerals Roman numerals across the front of the facade. It's 1888. Now, I don't know if anyone here has actually looked at the front of this building and can see that the Roman numerals go right across the entire front of the facade. It's a very interesting number, 1888. So let's move on. So in the Center Village Historic District, there is a National Historic District already, and that was designated in 1979. It runs roughly from Coombs Street, where the Arts Center is, that's going west from Coombs Street, up to just beyond Hamilton Street on the west side. So the east side, it's bounded by Coombs Street, and the west side, it's bounded by Hamilton Street. And a National Historic District is a paper designation. It's studied by usually the town's historical commission, and they apply for a national designation, which means that the United States government and the Parks Department sees that there's historic value in this area. The one thing that a National Historic District does not provide is protections to those properties. It is a paper designation, not an actual means of protection. That is, unless federal, municipal, or local funds are used to do any alterations to buildings or demolitions. At that time, the town's historical commission has a say in what can happen to those properties. But if someone were to just buy a property, they can do whatever they want to that property. So When we got together and founded the local historic district, and there's a difference between a national district and a local district, a local historic district, and that difference is in a local historic district, there is a committee, a commission that is actually made up of town members, and it's made up of property owners from within the district. It's made up of architects, realtors, real estate people, historians from the town. And these people utilize in Mass General Law 40C and also their own bylaw, which the town comes up with, they can have a regulatory oversight on the committee, on the actual district. What can and can't happen to the buildings in the area. And it's anything that's visible from a public way. Usually you would have to go to the local historic district commission and actually submit for a permit on your changes, on your alterations. In most times, you wouldn't have to do anything because the buildings basically stay the same. It would be if you wanted to do a radical change to a building. And any building in the proposed local district, when the district is designated, does not have to apply for anything at that point. We do not have to make changes to any buildings that are already there. It's only for future modifications. Okay, and so this is the proposed new district. If you look at this map, it will run from the Rotary, where Main Street comes into the town, into the downtown, and it exits at the intersection of South Street and Main Street, the fork in the road there by the Vienna restaurant and Felix, the statue. And it encompasses all of the properties along Main Street. And this was originally proposed back in the early 2000s. So what we wanted to do at that time is protect the gateways into the center village, which is that area that's roughly between Hamilton Street and Everett Street. We wanted to protect those parts coming into town so that those areas on those outskirts can't radically change in a way that throws off the dynamic of the geology and the topography of the land itself. And we'll get into that a little bit further when we begin to take our tour through the town. Our next slide shows the national district in that greenish yellow color, and it shows how back in the early part of the 2000s, you can see the gateway into both sides of Main Street actually are set up to protect that national district, and the national district becomes encompassed in the local historic district. And when we reactivated our committee, the local historic district study committee, there was talk within the committee, and I've heard interest outside of the committee in the general public to protect more buildings, because there are buildings at risk outside of that designated area. There's a strong urge to protect the buildings on Elm Street, such as the Congregational Church, the Town Hall itself, the Firehouse, the Hartwell House, which is today the Catholic Charities building. And on the other side, the north side of Main Street, along Central Street and Hamilton Streets, the buildings along those two streets, up to the depot. So this is currently what we're looking to have in the proposed district. So we'll go on from there. Now we'll get into a little bit of the town itself. Over here, you're looking at an 1828 map of downtown Southbridge. There are many maps of Southbridge going back into the 1800s, but this one is unique in the fact that it actually shows the facades of the buildings and what they look like. It was used in a lawsuit back in that time, a property dispute. But the interesting thing about it is the configuration of Main Street shows Main Street coming down from the left side, so that would be to your west, going to the east on your right side of that map. Central Street is basically going up. In the center of that page, there's actually a barn, a big L that sticks out, and that's where Central Street is today. Elm Street is across the street from that, and there's a building with an L a little bit in the center, and it has a nice L with an open archway. That was the old Southbridge Hotel, and the Columbia Building is on the right. An interesting fact about that Columbia Building, in this 1828 map, that building still exists. It was moved when the old YMCA was constructed back in the late 1800s, in the early 1890s. That building was moved. It is now at the corner of Foster Street and Hartwell and Wardwell Place. It's a looks like a blue three-decker, but it's actually a very old building. The building in the center on the top, a little bit to the left of center, it looks like a building, and there's a one-story building. That building is still in existence. So if you look at the left side of the map and you're looking at the north side of Main Street and you come down 4 buildings, that building, it still exists today. That's one of the oldest buildings in the downtown. It's over 100 years old, over 200 years old. Now a little bit more about our downtown. Here's a woodcut that was done in 1836. It shows the downtown of Southbridge as it looked then. Buildings that still exist today, once again, there's a wagon. If we look above the wagon, you could see a roof, the eave of a roof, and you see a little half-moon window there, and there are 4 chimneys. That building is on Hamilton Street. It's still there, and it's a little bit past the Universalist Church. The Columbia Building is on the left side. There's a sign hanging off it from the way up top. There's a little square sign. So that's a very interesting woodcut. And the Baptist Church is over to your right. That was originally in the place of the original town meeting house, the meeting house for the town of Southbridge. Here's another image that it's a mirror image, and this actually shows the buildings on Main Street. This area on the photograph that's on the right, it's about 1860. It's between Central Street and Foster Street, and it shows the Baptist Church and some commercial buildings. Those buildings were all destroyed in a fire in 1863. The Baptist Church was the first one rebuilt. That's in 1866, and that one is still there today. It's the Brick Baptist Church. After having a fire, it makes sense to build out of brick. And all the other buildings that went in after that day were all brick. Go figure. And that's where the Savers Bank is today, next to the Baptist Church. Yeah. So right, it's actually not in the proposed district, the Foster Street. No, at that point, it's only along Main Street, the properties that are just along Main Street. It's, when you get to Central Street, it will go down Central Street. And it's only concerned with the structures, not so much the infrastructure itself. So, okay, so we're going to take a little tour now into Southbridge in the proposed district. Now, the reason, once again, that we wanted to add from the Rotary to Felix, from the east side at the Rotary to the west side at Felix, is the lay of the land. As you see in this photograph, we are heading up a hill. The structure, the house that's on the right there is about 1840. The house next to it is about 1860 to 1870. There's a 1900 storefront, and beyond that is about a 1900 three-decker with a porch around it. And then on the opposite side of the street, as you can see, we're going up the hill. There's a gas station, and then we have 3 duplexes. Now, some of you, I don't know if anyone knows, but before those buildings were there used to be, that was the location of the first real AO complex. The AO built their complex on Mechanic Street they started in the 1870s. they had their old factory was here, and behind these duplexes, which were built in the 1930s, there was actually a pond where Cohasset Brook was. And so they had a regular mill race there, and that's where they did their work prior to building the big, huge plant on Mechanic Street. And beyond that, we could see another Victorian house, and you get a little image way to the right there of the Coombs house. The Coombs house on the corner of Coombs and Coombs and Main Street is probably, debatably, one of the oldest structures in the district. It's that and the other house, and the other building, the Coster Block, that's on Main Street further down that we'll get to. Here we see, we're now looking at the north side again of Main Street. We're going up the hill. If you look to the left, you'll see a nice curve into the road, and you'll see basically greenery, woodland, where you could actually, as you walk up the street or drive up the street, it invites you into the town. And that's why it's very important to try to protect this area as we're going into the center town. We have 1900s, early 1900 three-decker there, and we have those structures coming up are all late 1800s to early 1900s. That was actually, those structures were part of, they were part of AO's development, and George Wells owned a lot of that property. And he developed Walnut and Maple Terrace that we'll get back to in a little bit. This is, as we're going up Main Street, we see the Arts Center over there with its nice sweeping lawn and its hemlock trees, its pines. That was one of the names of the structure. It was the property was called the Pines. And we're coming into town at this point. As you can see, it's all greenery at this point. And now across the street, here's a couple of other late 1800s, 1890s homes. They were on George Wells' property. He had a mansion. It was originally the William Edwards place, but he developed this area where these two homes are. And if you go back, there's Maple and Walnut are on both sides of these two structures. On each side, the east side of the brown structure is one street, and the west side of the other structure is the other street. And now we're looking down. So I've turned around. This picture, we've turned around. We're at the Arts Center, and we're looking down the hill. So this kind of gives you another sweeping vista of the gateway that you come into when you come into town or when you're leaving town. It's a very, very beautiful and unique vista. It's one of a kind. Now, same spot, we're heading into the center village. And once again, you have a very human scale sidewalks, you have old structures, you have, there's the A.B. Wells house over here, about 1900 or so, and you can see the steeple of the Baptist church kind of in the center, and we're driving up Main Street right now. Well, we're walking up Main Street, actually. And this, we're looking at the south side of Main Street. We just crossed over to the street, and that's the new credit union, Southbridge Credit Union building, which I have to give them credit. They've actually, in their construction, they kind of blended it into the current infrastructure or the current structure look of the town. To its right, you'll see the old credit union headquarters, which was built sometime in the 1870s. And we are still entering into town. Now, does anyone know where this picture is? So this picture is before they built the new credit union. This is actually the old carriage house. The new credit union is probably where that lawn is and that car is right now. The cupola of that carriage house is now at Sturbridge Village. It's currently in storage. But I always thought that was a really nice shot. Kind of, it's hard to believe you're in a downtown of a mill town when you look at that vista. And now we're looking down, we're looking at the north side of Main Street, and we're at Everett Street. And there we see the Carpenter Beecher House, which is about 1840. The 1914 Jacob Edwards Library is next to that. So we're starting from the right to left. So the yellow house is Beecher Carpenter. 1914 Jacob Edwards Library, 1866 Baptist Church, 1872 Amadon Building, which is now Savers Bank. And they did a commendable job on the restoration of that building back in the early 2000s. Here's another image of the credit union at Main Street and Everett. There's a great view of the town hall there, the tower. You also see a little bit of the post office. The credit union has been upkeep in this building, even though it's not in use and it is for sale. So that's one of the reasons why a local historic district is somewhat important, because at this point anyone can buy that building and anyone could do anything to that building. So it's kind of endangered. So now we get into the real town of Southbridge. This is the center village. This is where the commercial heart of Southbridge began. It began before Southbridge was even a town. Southbridge was founded in 1816. It became a town. The town fathers got together in 1795 to begin discussing creating the town. The reason why this part of the town actually grew into what it became is simply because of the river behind it, the Quinnebog River. It provided a lot of mill spots, and Marcy was a large property owner in the area and set up mills, carton mills, lumber mill, and there was quite a few mills back in the late 1700s. And so it only lended itself to develop commercially in front of the river, because people would take their goods to the mill and have it processed. They can go right to a store. Zabina Abbott had a store. I think that was the earliest store back in the late 1700s. And that was in the area kind of by the Baptist church that we just looked at. So in this picture, you'll see an 1885 image on the left and a 2021 image on the right. As a matter of fact, that image was just taken a couple of weeks ago. You'll see that they're exactly the same image. There's minor differences, so it's not exactly the same. The chimneys have gone away for the most part. The horse watering fountain in the middle of Main Street has gone away. I believe that was a gift from George Angel. If anyone knows anything about George Angel, he was the founder of the MSPCA. He was born in Southbridge, so he had a place in his heart for the town. Of course, the need for a horse watering fountain is no longer present. Instead, we have a turning symbol on the pavement. But still, the buildings themselves are intact, and that's a great resource to have. The historical integrity of that shot right there shows great things. This is another picture. We're now a little bit up Main Street on the south side, looking to the east, and we see a picture from 1875 on the left and one from just a couple weeks ago on the right. And until 2016, that photograph would look just about exactly the same as the one from 1875. We lost the Perrin building in a fire in 2016, but still, you can see the integrity is there, the historical character is there, and it's worth protecting. The one thing that is missing, besides the Perrin building, if you look at the picture on the left from 1875, you'll see a cupola way on top of that, and that was the old Dresser House. It was a hotel. And I believe it was the first hotel in the town to have electric lighting. It was built, around 1870. So that was destroyed in a fire in 1971. So here's another image. This is a great image looking at the north side of Main Street. We are standing at the corner of Elm and Main, and we are looking up towards Notre Dame Church. All of these buildings are in place except for one, and that is the Perrin building, which is the right side of the building. It's one in. There are two buildings, the Costa Block, which is the old Vets Cab building, which is the oldest building in the center. The one next to it was the Perrin Building. The Perrin Building, once again, was destroyed in a fire in 2016, and I hear through the grapevine that another building that will look very similar to the building that's in this photograph will be built on that spot very soon. So that's good news, and that's one of the reasons I have this shot. So maybe it'll look just the same in another couple of years. But this shows the vista into the center. The center is relatively level. It's a level street at this point. The reason why it's a level street is because in 1826, sewer was built under Main Street at just about this point, because there used to be a brook that crossed Main Street. It's called Nuisance Brook. Still is. And every spring it would flood, and it would cause all kinds of havoc in this area. It would flood out the whole downtown. So it was Holmes Amadown, who actually was the highway surveyor for the town of Southbridge in the 1820s, who actually closed it in and raised the grade right there. So it was a good job on his part and that's why the street is somewhat level today. Another story about Nuisance Brook and the reason it's got its name, one reason was the flooding, but the other reason is in the summertime, when it would be dry, it would be very smelly, because in those days, people used to, a lot of their structures, they would just remove their waste into the stream, so it would be very, very nasty. So, but that's a little bit of a history lesson. But that's right here in the center downtown, and I hear there are still accesses to that Nuisance Brook in some of those buildings, in the basements of some of those buildings. We're looking at in the distance, you see the great steeple of Notre Dame, built in 1916, and on the left of that, you can see sticking up the spire for the Methodist Church, which is the oldest house of worship in the town. It's 1836 it was built. A little bit down from Notre Dame, there's another little church. It was Universalist Church. Its steeple was blown down. You can see the base of the steeple. It was blown down in the hurricane of 38, and that was built around 1841. All these buildings that you're looking at on this street were all built with the exception of the Columbia, I think before 1900. Columbia might have been built in 1907, but maybe the Newman's was around 1900 as well. All right, so we'll go to the next slide. All right, we have the Whitford Block. This is a great building. It's this nice curved building at the intersection of Hamilton and Main Street. And when you look at it today, that's the image on the right, the 2021 image, and the 1900 image on the left. That building probably would not be here today if it weren't for some very forward-looking people back in the late 70s, because there was a fire in 1979 that destroyed the building. The upper mansard roof that you see with the dormers on it was destroyed in that fire. The town elected to prop up the facade of the building, and that's what saved that facade. A new building was built behind it after the fire, and they incorporated that facade into the building. It was a great feat of preservation. So as we go on, this is another great double image of the town. We have an 1885 image on the left and a 2003 image on the right. The 2003 image on the right hasn't changed at all since the picture was taken. I couldn't get a good shot. That's why it's not a 2021 picture, because of the sun and the angle of the sun. But it is still the same today, except there's no snow on the ground like there is in that picture. But as you can see, it looks the same as it did in 1885. Now, something that I would mention to the people who remember the old Y building at the corner of Main and Elm Street, that magnificent, I think it was 4 stories, and it had a huge cupola on top, a huge tower, basically. This image from today, if you look at it today going down street, is more in line to what it was in 1885 before they built the Y, though the Y was a very imposing building. It's just an interesting aside. And now we're looking, we turn around, we're at the same point basically, we're a little bit down the street, and we turn around and we're looking towards the west, and we're looking at the north side of Main Street, west of Hamilton Street. And we see the great Universalist Church, minus the steeple, which was destroyed in the hurricane of '38, but it's still an imposing structure, and it is a great church building. It's, and then we have the First National Market. You can see kind of the side brick facade of that next to the tree a little bit further up. And then we have 2 3-deckers from the early 1900s, about 1900, 1910. And then beyond that, there's LaSalle Hall, and then there's the great Notre Dame Church, which is part of St. John Paul II Parish. That was built in 1916. And now we're going to look at the south side of Main Street as we're going through town, and we're heading out of the center village now. This part of the town has changed the most in the last 40 years, 50 years. There's an image from 2003 on the left, which shows before Cumberland Farms was built. You could kind of see the Friendly's sign on the very left side of that photograph. And a little ways up from that, you see a house. That house is a pre-1840s colonial, and it still had the original door on it. Rose Mendez, I believe, was the owner at the time. It had been sided, but it still had the original door, and it was a terrific door and a terrific house. Next to the house was CVS, and then as you look up the street, you can see in the distance the steeple of the Methodist Church in both of those pictures, and once again, that's 1836. And the reason why we would want to incorporate this, even though it's changed drastically in the last 50 years or so, is it still is the gateway approach into the center village. And the construction that has been done in the last years was done in coordination with the planning board. The Historic Commission had some say on signs, but the planning board did a great job working with both CVS and Cumberland Farms, and further up Walgreens when they were being constructed. Cumberland Farms put a nice red brick terracing and plantings. They moved, instead of putting the gas pumps in front of the building, they agreed to put them on the side so as you don't have gas pumps right in front on Main Street. That was a very, very wise discussion that was had by the planning board. Okay, and now we're up at the top, heading out of what would be the proposed local historic district. On your left is the site of the Beechwood, which was torn down in 2019. You see the sign is still there, which is right there. And that's about it. And then we see the Vienna over to the right, a little bit in the distance. The Vienna hasn't been the Vienna for quite a few years. It was originally built as a J.J. Oakes house back in the 1860s. It was an example of 1860s Victorian Italianate design. Now, the Vienna and the credit union are the last two in the town that have that design. And they're both, the credit union is for sale, so that's a warning flag. And the Vienna, unfortunately, has some renovations going on to it, and I think some of the historic characters leaving that building. This picture is a little bit older. This shows the Beechwood on the left and the Vienna on the right. You can see how it filled in that area with those old homes. The Beechwood was a great 1860s stick-style Victorian mansion. It was built by the Marcy family. It was actually built for, I guess, the granddaughter of Jebediah Marcy, maybe, as a wedding gift when she'd gotten married, I believe. We'll move on from there, though. Here's an example. The Wells School, Wells High School, Wells Middle School, it is also in the district. We're at the very end of what would be the proposed district. There is not a local historic district at this time. This is just proposed. But the people who are doing the work on the Wells building are doing a good job. They're filling their windows. They're keeping the original design of the school intact. So they're putting on new windows that are in keeping with the historical character of the building, and they're not altering the door frames too much. So it's a nice job, a nice rehabilitation job and restoration job from the public way, even though it's all apartments inside. But it's very in keeping with what the local historic district would want to happen. The Vienna, on the other hand, the old J.J. Oaks home, the window treatments are a little bit out of place. They're not the right windows, they're the wrong size. One of the things the local historic district study committee is looking at are exclusions for what can and can't be done during a renovation or a restoration. And one of them is the materials used for windows. It's somewhat open, but you must replace the window with a like window. So it doesn't have to be wood sash and all that stuff. It could be a vinyl clad wood or whatever, but it should fit the entire window frame. In the Vienna, that does not seem to be what's happening. So it kind of the character of that home is leaving. Just something to show. And here are the endangered buildings that we're looking at right now in the proposed local historic district and the downtown itself. The credit union building is for sale, and the old Santander Bank building, which was the Worcester County National Bank, Worcester County Bank, built in 1929, was not a good year to build a bank because of the Depression, but nonetheless, that building is vacant right now. So we don't know what's happening to the inside of that building. So that is in danger. And here's some buildings that are within the proposed districts that have been lost in the last 10 years. We have the Beechwood, that beautiful stick-style mansion. We have the Rose Mendez house, which is about 1840. And we have the Perrin building, which was lost to fire. The other two buildings were knocked down. They were just razed. Okay. But going back to a more positive thing, Southbridge is a great walk-in village. It's a great walk-in town. And here's some images of the sidewalks. Some people don't really take the time to look, but they're really absolutely beautiful. And it shows the vistas of the town. It shows the lay of the land. If you're walking down the sidewalk by Cornerstone Bank, you're looking towards the hill, so it just drops off on the horizon. It's actually a beautiful, beautiful walk. And on the other side, this is on the one with the mailbox, the picture on the left, is actually right as you're on Elm Street, facing west, walking on the south side of Main Street. You can see the level spot, and then it begins to rise. And it's a beautiful, inviting, it wants to take you around the corner. You want to walk and see what's around that bend. And it's the same with the picture on the right there. For me, I just want to walk and see where that goes. And of course, this is by the library. It's a beautiful vista, it's a beautiful town, it's a beautiful downtown. And there's a lot of positive things in this downtown. And these positive things, which include the historical character of the downtown itself, should be protected. And that is why we have a local historic district study committee that is working to create a local historic district in our downtown. All right, here's an aside. Can anyone guess what building is on the site of this today? There's a big hint. On the right, behind the tree, on the right side of the photograph, you can actually see a building. That building is still there today. And I'll give you a couple of seconds to look at it and study that image. Does anyone have an idea? Well, that today is where Dunkin' Donuts is. The Methodist Church is right next to the tree on the right side. You could actually see the foundation of the Methodist Church. So that kind of shows what happens, you know, as a commercial center grows. All right, so let's get into establishing a local historic district. What does it take to get it done? So first, a local historic district study committee has to be appointed. That has been done. The local historic district study committee meets with the Massachusetts Historical Commission staff. That has been done. The local historic district study committee conducts a property owner opinion survey, prepares educational material, conducts informal meetings like we're having today, and prepares the preliminary study report. These are going on right now. The property owner survey will probably go out next month, and we will also do a survey for the town at large through Facebook. We'll have an online survey that will be done. Next, once we have to complete the preliminary study report, the report will contain the following. It will have an introduction, methodology on the approach on how to do it, the significance of the area, the justification of the boundaries, the recommendations for a bylaw, a map of the proposed district, and a property street address index and the bylaw. And those that don't know, this is the study that's going on today. Currently, it's about 74 pages, and it contains an index of all of the properties, photographs of the properties, and when the structures were constructed. Great. Just to let you know that invitations were sent to all property owners within the district, within the proposed district. So we do have the spreadsheet that has all the addresses, and it came through the assessor's office. So let's go on. The preliminary study report is then submitted to the MHC and the planning board. Now, something to bring up is the preliminary report isn't done yet. It is a work in progress. First of all, there has to be buy-in through the property owner survey, which hasn't gone out yet. Once that's done, then the preliminary study report is submitted. When it's completed, then there is a public hearing. A warrant article is prepared for the final report, map, and bylaw, which isn't completed yet because the preliminary study report isn't done. It is a work in progress. And then at the point when the final report is done, which is probably months from now, it is submitted to the town manager and the town council. Once it goes to the town council, there is a vote. It's an approval of a 2/3 vote by the town council. And it is read for 3 consecutive meetings. Then the Attorney General reviews the bylaw and all of the final report. Then there's a filing of the bylaw with the town clerk and the recording at the Registry of Deeds of the bylaw, and then the local historic district is created. So, questions and answers at this time. Yes, please.
According to section 4, the commission of the study committee, shall include one or more members of or owners of a historic district. Who are the owners within the proposed district that were invited, and what are their names and property addresses?
Okay, I believe a member of the study committee is a property owner. It's Gabriel McCarthy. And also we have the list from the assessor's office of all the properties within the proposed district where letters have been sent. We can show that to you right after the meeting. And what happened in the Beechwoods case is, what was saving the Beechwood is that was actually zoned 2-family residential. and the zoning changed to commercial. And that's what actually caused the demolition of the building. The building would have been demolished because there was a property, someone interested in the property who didn't end up buying it, but there was too much work with the building itself, and so they backed out of the deal. So what can be done is to maintain zoning in such a way that it cannot change the structure, you know, in a significant way. Because right now, the way that the buildings are protected would be through the planning board, when any major alteration has to go before the planning board. So that's where the protection would happen.
My question is this, is what can we do as a town to stop something like the Beechwood? The reason why it was supposed to be torn down was an auto parts store. We don't need another one put on in a historical district. So what can we do to stop something such, that kind of business coming into a historical district once it comes full circle?
Are you asking when it becomes
When it becomes a historical district, how do you stop having something
Well,
such as Cumberland Farms, a huge building that
Yeah.
way?
There would be requirements on the way that the buildings would be built.
So like Sturbridge did with Cumberland Farms, they made sure that it was built, looked like a house.
Right, right.
I was just asking, what can we do in the town, once the historical district comes into place, how can we stop a big part, like a parts store going on to a property like the Beechwood or Cumberland Farms, a big piece of property, essentially saving another building?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Like, if someone wanted to come in and build, say, a McDonald's or a Barnes and Noble box store, they could come in and buy the property, but with a local historic district, they would have to build it within the confines of the district bylaw itself. And when you have the district in place, what you have is you follow the bylaws in such a way that it goes in conjunction with the Secretary of the Interior's standards for rehabilitation and restoration of historic buildings. So, and any new buildings too will fall into that. So there are basic guidelines that have to be followed in the construction of any new building. If per se, even with the demolition delay, it goes beyond the demolition timeline, because I believe they're set on a timeline, any new build would have to fit into the current fabric of the district. And that's why the property values go up in those districts, because the fabric is maintained, the historic character is maintained. Yes?
Who would be regulating that? Would it be up to the planning board?
Okay. Yep.
Or the local district assessment?
Okay, so that's an excellent question. The question is, who would regulate that? The way it would work is that any alteration to a building, or any major alteration to a building, or a new build comes in, and it's located within the local historic district, then the first place it goes is to the local historic district commission. And they have to pull a permit from there, and the permit has to be approved, and then it goes to the planning board, and then it goes on and on. But it is an extra step. Okay, the question, Gabriel said that there was a Home Depot in Watertown that was built into an existing building in a historic district. So that's, and it wasn't built as a box store. Well, we'll see how it pans out, right? We have to have, the property owner survey has to come back. All the property owners are entitled to their view. Then we'll take it from there. You are more than welcome to come to the monthly meetings that we have. These are all public meetings. We've been meeting the first Wednesday of the month for almost 2 years now. So and going forward, this is the first public presentation that we've had. There are no votes at this meeting. It's a presentation. So there's nothing is going on here. There's no regulation at this point. There's nothing. We're just starting it. We are beginning to roll it. You're at the beginning now. You're at the beginning of the process. The very first thing that we do is we send out the property owner survey. That's what we do. And depending on how the property owners reply to that survey determines whether the district goes forward. The introductory public presentation does not determine how the survey goes out. But I will let you know the survey will go out next month, and we have the list of property owners. You're free to review it right here tonight, right after this meeting. You can see it. Or if Francine wants to take it to you so you can look it over, you could do it right now. I'd like to, at this point, celebrate our democracy and the fact that this discussion is going on here. It's wonderful. One of the things about the bylaw, and you know, when we really get the proposed bylaw together, and you're free to come to our next public meeting, which is on January 12th, it's a Wednesday, you can look over some of the ideas that we have. Each town has its own, each local historic district has its own regulatory bylaw. It can. Some towns, multiple local historic districts are covered by the same bylaw. In some towns, different local historic districts are covered by their own bylaw. There are exclusions. We are supposed to, a local historic district is supposed to follow Mass Law 40, Chapter C, and Chapter 40C. And that gives each town the ability to exclude certain things. One of the things we discussed in the past are windows. What is right to regulate about a window? In some towns, they regulate you have to replace a wood sash window with a wood sash window. We wouldn't look to do that. Some towns say you can't put an air conditioner in a window facing the street. We have no plan to do that. Some towns say you can't put a satellite dish on. You can't paint the building blue. You can't. These are not things that we would do. That's why we have this public presentation today, to bring people together to talk about it, to start it, to see what the exclusions are. We are really at the beginning of making this happen, and that's why we're having this public meeting. Just to let you know, it's not that they're all the same. Right. You also have the opportunity, besides in the survey, to determine what should be regulated and what shouldn't be regulated. You also have a section there just for comments. You could put if you agree with it or you disagree with it, and that's what we're looking for. That's why we're doing the survey. If the majority of the people are not for it, then it's not going to happen. The majority of the property owners. That's how this democracy works. Once again, every one of those points that you brought up are, I believe, excludable. And we go out of our way. This is why we're doing this. We want to find out, what does the town want? What do the property owners within the district want? Do they want to protect the historic character of the downtown, or do they not? And if they do, what do they want to have protected or not protected? Because the bylaw is pretty open on what you can exclude. You know, 40C gives you the right to have exclusions. You have to look at that law. Okay, so the question is the survey going to go out to all the property owners within the proposed local historic district, which is inclusive of the national district? Yes, every property owner will receive a survey. Every property owner will have a right to do a survey. They will have a choice. They can do it written or online. So it will be encompassed in the local district. So all of those properties, right, all of those properties will get the survey there, because the national district, doesn't have any regulatory body on it. It's just a paper designation unless federal, state, or municipal funds are used. So all of those are part of the new district, even the national, okay? The property owners have the weight. because they're the ones who are affected. The town may want it. All the people in the town may want it overwhelmingly. But someone living on North Woodstock Road won't be affected by that bylaw. That's what I'm saying. So that's why the property owners within the proposed district have the weight. It is up to the property owners within the district to say yay or nay, that they want it or they don't want it. Right, absolutely, you're absolutely right. And that is why in local historic districts, the property values tend to go up faster than in the surrounding areas that do not have a local historic district. Simply because the fabric is maintained, the character of that area is maintained. You can move into a district and know that the property next door isn't going to be vastly altered in such a way that it becomes a box store, you know, or a high rise or whatever, you know. Yeah, and I understand, you know, you're reading of those, you know, it's you find everything online, you know, and but right, okay, Forbes, okay. You know, for our next meeting, which is on January 12th, we invite you to come. We can go back and forth on citing outcomes to whether property values go up or go down. So it's not a zoning question on residential, commercial. It's an architectural feature. So it looks at the building itself and the period in which it was built, and what has been done to it up to this point, you know, and what is the change that's going to happen to it in the future. In most cases, nothing. If someone wants to replace a window, as long as it's the same, the casement goes in the same size window, nothing's going to happen. You know, it doesn't. It's not commercial versus private. It's the architectural feature of the building, the structure itself. Right, and if you were to do a major change, it would probably, a minor change would probably not even affect, it wouldn't be affected. But a major change, there are certain things, there are tax credits, historical restoration tax credits that are utilized, and sometimes in the state of Massachusetts, there's actually funds for rehabilitation and restoration for historic properties. I don't think there's been any lately, but I know in the past there have. And there are the federal income tax credits for historic preservation. It's a 20% tax credit. So you know, if the building's done following the Secretary of Interior's restoration guidelines. But those things, a lot of the things that are in there would most likely be excluded in our bylaw because our bylaw isn't going to be that restrictive. And once again, it's up to the property owners. Answer the survey. Let us know if you're interested in protecting the buildings, protecting your properties, your structures, and knowing what exclusions you would like to see. That is the information we're looking for, because we don't want to just steamroller over. We can't. It's illegal for us to do that. We want to be able to work with the property owners to make it as painless as possible, but yet ensure that the historic character of the downtown remains, because it's beneficial to everyone. Yep. So the comment was made on the important, you know, how you felt that the town had more history than the place you grew up in, right, in the last 40 years. And I find that to be true too, because where I'm from, down in New York, on Long Island, there is no history. It's gone. I mean, you look at suburbia, all history's gone. You look at the town I'm from, Hicksville, which is on Long Island. The Main Street was a beautiful Main Street. The town of Hicksville was a population of 5,000 in 1946. It was 50,000 by 1960. They tore down one whole side of Main Street. It was nothing but dust, and now it's all strip malls. So, you know, there's something to be said about trying to preserve the historical character of something, of your community. It's important. The other point you made was historical markers, and that is a great suggestion. As a matter of fact, one of the things we've talked about are smart tags on the buildings, especially downtown, where you can go up with your iPhone and take a picture, do the smart tag, and the whole history of the building will come out. And what happened at that site? Who built the building? What year was it built? And photographs, early photographs of the building. To me, that's an amazing thing that we should be doing. And we're looking to get that going. That's one of the things we would love to do with the local historic district, but you don't need a local historic district to make that happen. But you need the local historic district to ensure that it is somewhat protected, that we don't lose it. Because you don't want the state of Massachusetts to come in and bulldoze one side of 131 because they need to widen it, right? I mean, that can happen too. I've seen that happen in New York. I mean, they just come through and with a bulldozer, boom. As a matter of fact, the people in Hicksville did not know that that was happening. It was a 2-lane Main Street. First thing they did is they raised the railroad tracks off the ground. They put them on like pillars. They elevated the railroad tracks. The only hint that the property owners had that their side of Main Street was going to disappear was the fact that where they widened the road where they elevated the tracks, there was a 4-lane underpass. Kind of like if you drive on Route 20 in Auburn and you'll see where they made it for 4 lanes, but they never actually built the 4 lanes where the Mass Pike goes over Route 20. They did that with the railroad tracks in Hicksville. That was in 1963. The people found out along a mile stretch of Main Street in 1964 that all of their properties were going to be taken and bulldozed. 100, 200-year-old homes, didn't matter. Gone, because the population was growing and things were just, going crazy. So I've seen that kind of destruction, and it's not a nice thing to see, because people love to complain about this, that, and the other thing, but sometimes there's a purpose. Sometimes it protects things. In our discussions with the Massachusetts Historical Commission, the one that we have right now is on the large size, the proposal that we have now. So you could have as many local historic districts within a town as you want. I mean, there are national districts, mind you. I think it's pretty much fixed for now. And I think if there are others, maybe they could be in others later on. I know Chapin Street. Chapin Street is a National Historic District. That is one of them. And I think there are 12 historic districts within the town of Southbridge. But we're not looking to, we're concentrating on Main Street. That's what we're concentrating on. All right, thank you, Gabe. Gabe just mentioned the fact that the local historic district has nothing to do with zoning so much and changing what properties are used for, what can be done with properties. It's once again, it's the structure itself. How does the structure look, and is it kept intact with the historic character of the area that it's in? And with that, I think what I'll do is we'll close the meeting now. It was very informative. I loved hearing all the input, and I hope people enjoyed the presentation as well and learned a little bit. The local historic district's next meeting is January 12th. That's a Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock. Once again, thank you all for coming. I appreciate it.